Hello, video 4. Now we are going to be talking about the Axes suit, which is the rock and roll. Okay, this is the 4th of 5 videos in this series about the Rhythm and Soul Tarot. I am the artist and maker behind the Rhythm and Soul Tarot. That's my name, Stacey Williams-Ng. And today we are talking about the Minor Arcana. And this is the equivalent of the suit of swords, but it is called the suit of axes because axe is a slang term for a guitar. So here we have the legendary Fender Stratocaster, and it's being held by the hand of an angel, I suppose, just like on a classic album cover, valiantly. And this is going to be the weapon with which we shred the song. So it's actually not a whole lot different, if you think about it, between this meaning and the meaning of the traditional meaning of the Ace of Swords. The Ace of Swords is slicing through truth, voice, starting something powerful, slicing through the bullshit, that sort of thing. And that really lines up with kind of the spirit of rock and roll. So let's get started. Looking at the 2. So in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, you see a woman seated and she's holding her arms in this X fashion, but she's holding 2 swords. And here we have a rock and roll girl drummer doing kind of the same thing. And she's blindfolded, and she is also facing that decision, that duality that you get in the 2s. And in the 2 of Swords, it's supposed to be like a really important decision that you really have to go one way or the other. It's a binary decision. It's this way or that. There's absolutely no compromise. And so I also have the brand of the, you can hear my dog growling. She wants my attention. I also have the brand of the drums as peace. So that's another little symbol of, often we try to make these decisions in order to be a peacemaker, to make everything even. But you can't always find that balance. The 3 of Swords, or the 3 of Axes, is almost like a James Dean character, although I painted him more from like models I found online because I just wanted to have like a really handsome greaser guy with a pompadour in the leather jacket. He's almost like that iconic rock and roll, like the James Dean, that rebel without a cause. And I've always thought of the 3 of Swords, that classic graphic that we've all seen so many times, as almost like tattoo art. So I made it almost like a gang symbol, or, it's his gang or his motorcycle group. But the 3 of Swords is about heartbreak. 3 swords piercing violently through a heart. We've all felt this way. And so I have him crying. So he's a little bit of a 1950s romantic, tragic boy. And now we have the tragic girl. So now we have the rock and roll starlet who can't sleep at night. So the 4 is meant, you've all seen the knight in the tomb. The 4 of Swords is meant to be about rest. And so she actually has those 4 swords above her head, which is a nod to the original deck. But she's holding her axe. She's holding her acoustic guitar. Typically axes were electric guitars, but you get what I'm saying. So she's maybe a songwriter. She's maybe the guitarist in a band, and she's just not getting the rest she needs. Her eyes are red. The 5. So this is that rumble. 1950s rumble. Makes me think of the movie Grease when they all drag raced. But the 5 of Swords is supposed to be a card about conflict and about who's winning, who's bullying who's getting away with something, and who's overcoming the other. What kind of conflict is this about? So it is typically a very vague interpretation of a conflict. We can tell they've been fighting. These guys are walking away. We don't know if they're recovering. So it is about hurting others. It is about disagreements. And so what we have here is that iconic, again, I'm going for archetypes of rock and roll. So this is that iconic, my boyfriend's coming back to town and he's going to get you. So it's those kind of corny 1950s songs, but it's portraying a very real feeling. The 6 of Swords, or the 6 of Axes in this case, is about how we recover. And so continuing with my lone motorcycle heroic motif that you get in so much rock and roll, I have an American highway, and we've got the couple who are riding off into the sunset, they've decided to pack up because it's about being with your loved ones and prioritizing what's important to you. The 7, the trickster, the thief, something's going down, something shady is going down. He's holding 7 record albums, which he's presumably stealing. He also has a bag, which looks like someone who might be, he's pictured in the shadows. And he's got that shifty-eyed look that I really tried to capture. But a fun little subplot going on here is this album that we can see. I designed that based on a real album in which the artist claimed that their copyright had been stolen. The 8 of swords, or the 8 of axes. This performer is tied up and she's blindfolded. But is she really? We can see it's a performance. We can see there's a spotlight on her. We can see she's surrounded by microphones. In fact, there's 8 of them. And they create a kind of jail around her. But she's not really in jail. It's a performance. And so it's a little bit different than the traditional 8 of swords, but not really, because in this 8 of swords, it's not just that it's something of her own imagining. It's something that we're in on and we're enjoying because it's a performance. So there's a new layer of the meaning of this card, which is to feel trapped, but really it's something that is unnecessary. The 9. The 9 of swords is the headache card, the migraine card, the staying up at night and exhausted kind of card, worries, troubles. And I have 9 axes or 9 guitars on the wallpaper behind her, but she's basically having a sleepless night and is tormented by something. I tried to give her the most tormented pose I could think of. She looks really uncomfortable. She's almost choking herself because she's just absolutely miserable and cannot sleep. The 10. So the 10 of swords typically shows this guy face down with 10 swords in his back. It's supposed to be about absolute defeat, just utter defeat, almost in a comical way. It's not meant to be a comical card, but I've always found Pamela Coleman Smith's illustration kind of funny, right? It's one thing to have 10 swords in your back. It's one thing to get stabbed 10 times, but to have 10 literal swords in your back is a little comical. Anyway, I wanted to portray within the idea of rock and roll, within the idea of rock and roll music, the idea of defeat. And I thought about how these musicians smash their guitars. So we have these 2 completely smashed, destroyed guitars. But there are 10 pieces of them if you count. The page. So didn't I tell you it was going to be a kid playing the instrument? Because as I've said before, and as many of you have studied, the difference between that spark that's represented in the ace versus the spark or the beginning represented in the page card is that the ace is really the idea. It's the nugget, it's the spark of the idea, the thing itself. But the page is when you yourself have the youthful enthusiasm, the energy, the willingness, the curiosity to do it. And so this being the air suit, it's about the life of the mind, it's about ideas. So this card, this nerdy kid smiling, he's so happy to have this rock and roll guitar, and I put him in the nerdiest 1950s clothes you could imagine. But I wanted him to really represent that goofy enthusiasm when we decide to really take something up, use our voice, and we don't care what anyone else thinks, we're just going to do it. The knight, rock and roll enthusiasm. He's almost air guitaring. We've all seen the guys do this. But he's got a real guitar. But he is just playing the hell out of that guitar. He is action. And sure enough, the Knight of Swords is very much about debate and about speaking your mind and really taking action on what you're about to do in a much more courageous way. It's a courage kind of card. The Queen. I've pictured her almost as a saint because Wanda is just so awesome. And I've pictured her with Wanda Jackson's guitar and her little shimmy dress, and she almost has a halo with the moon here. Wanda Jackson was called the female Elvis, which is just so annoying because she had a very different rockabilly style than Elvis, and she was really an artist in her own right. She was never copying him. If anything, he was copying other artists. Wanda was incredibly original. So she represents the Queen. Now, the Queen of Swords is a definitive card in the deck. A lot of people will buy a deck based on the Queen of Swords. because she's just so cool. Like, she is this no-nonsense business leader, and she's the kind of woman who leads with masculine energy, with logic and with power. And so she is just a really iconic figure, and I really hope I captured her in this Queen of Axes. The King of Axes is inspired by Chuck Berry, and not a really great guy on a personal level. You can Google him if you want. But the King of Axes, I needed him to be somebody who is an expert guitarist, who's really at the top of his game and really confident. And the King of Swords is almost like a lawyer card, if you will. The King of Swords is supposed to be a judge, a lawyer. He's really sharp-minded. He's like a CEO, an authoritative guitarist in the rock and roll genre. And that concludes the rock and roll, the air, the axes suit, inspired by the early origins of rock and roll. And these are not the only rock and roll cards. The Major Arcana does have a mixture of rock and roll, country, blues, and jazz. So you'll see some other rock and roll references in the Major Arcana. In the next video, we are going to talk about country music, which I call roots, and that is the suit of earth. Thanks.